I'm lit up. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's Policy and Resources Committee of Worcester City Council. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. So, appointment of substitutes. I think we have quite a few, don't we?
I've got two. We've got Ed Kimberley here for Robin Norfolk, and we've got Jenny Barnes here for Richard Udell.
Any others? No? Okay. Thank you for that. Any declarations of interest relevant to the agenda items? Alex?
So I've latterly realised with local government reorganisation on the agenda I should declare my wife works for Worcestershire County Council.
Thank you. We've got no public representations, so that brings us to the minutes of the last meeting, which was the 15th of July. If I go through those page by page, any corrections or amendments? Page 1, page 2. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. On point 20, I haven't had a response regarding community safety and property marking. Thank you.
Okay, so that needs to be recorded as an action point to be picked up and taken forward then. Thank you. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. So committee members happy for me to sign those off with that. It's a matter arising really, isn't it? Thank you. So then we have item 5, Corporate Peer Challenge Report and Action Plan. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, we undertook a corporate peer challenge back in April of 2025, which is a local government association's peer challenge, which really forms a key part of the improvement and assurance framework for local authorities and helps us to deliver on our best value duty. And the team spent 4 days on site, and we published the report, which is brought for you tonight and linked in here on our website some 4 months ago. A very pleasing, positive and strong view of the council, and the report picks out some of those highlights. That the council is well led politically and managerially, some really positive messages from stakeholders, and they commended the way that all of the political parties work together for the benefit of the city. The report also made some constructive suggestions for further improvements, of which there were 10 formal improvements. And also there were a number of suggestions throughout the report that didn't make it into their 10 key recommendations, but in the spirit of the continuous improvement, supporting best value, we've also addressed those. So officers have developed an action plan, which is Appendix 1 to this report, which responds to those recommendations and further suggestions. We are required to publish the action plan within 5 months of the visit, so we're about due to do that now. Members are asked to approve the action plan. I won't go through that now, but I'm happy to take questions on that. And I would commend that to members of the committee to approve that action plan, and then we will then publish that and proceed with it.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments? Mel?
Chair, thank you. Just a quick one. I welcome the recommendations around increasing engagement with partners and wider partnerships. But obviously, we had the changeover with Crown Gate Shopping Centre roughly February of this year. I just want to be assured that we are looking for more wider partnership working and communication and engagement with private sector as well as the public. And I think it's Starburst UK Limited now own Crown Gate, don't they? I just want to ensure that we are involved with that one, just like assurance, that's all.
Through you, Chair, I can reassure members that there is actually a very regular dialogue with the new owners of that asset at different levels of the organisation, strategically and operationally, and it's really good to be able to build that relationship with them.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for officers for the report and all their recommendations. I think this is, obviously we have a good report already, and it's going to be good to see how we continue to improve. I think on recommendation 2 about developing the strategies and planning for the budget in 2026-27 to close the MTFP gap, I'm glad to see the suggestion that CMT are engaged on early identification of pressures and opportunities for the budget gap. I think, as I've said before in meetings, it's going to be key to see what those suggestions are as early as possible so that we can debate and agree what's going to be the way forward for the next year's budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Jabba?
Thank you, Chair. The corporate peer review is effectively an offset for us, for our council, isn't it, in terms of external auditors coming in, assessors having to look at every part of the organisation, looking for strengths, looking at weaknesses, look at our opportunities, and this report kind of highlights actually how well we've done in the current political climate, as well as the current economic and financial climate, in terms of how we've managed our city and our taxpayers' resources in terms of that, and that we should take great pride in that we've got really, really good relationships, both on a political level across the board in terms of working for the best for our city, as well as our officer and member relationships in terms of that. And those are the relationships that avoid key fundamental failures in communication out to the general public in terms of that. And that generally, most of the problems we get is a failure of communication out into the general public. And I think we've hit all the little notes there. There are obviously areas of improvement that we can make within this report. And considering the volume of work that we've got going on and ahead, I think we should be incredibly proud of ourselves of what we've achieved with the amount of money we've drawn into this city and what we've been able to deliver. We've consistently been able to deliver with the money that we've been given from external sources, and we've shown the UK, the government, and regionally that actually Worcester has punched above its weight. Worcester is able to deliver. Worcester is here to stay, and Worcester is regionally one of the best top performing cities in the UK. So I think we should be incredibly proud of this report in terms of that, and take the learnings from it. Officer capacity is a real issue, and I keep highlighting this on a considerable amount of inevitably we've got the budget coming along shortly in that process in terms of that, and each political party will have their needs and wants and red lines in terms of that. And I urge members to again be pragmatic with the resources that we have, with the challenges that we've got in terms of local government resources, to be understanding of the pressures that our officers are going to, and just to manage the expectations out there in terms of what we are able to deliver. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yep, absolutely. Okay, I've got Pat first and then Edward.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in agreement with Jabbar that this is a terrific advertisement for the council in its way, because a corporate peer challenge is an independent assessment of how we're doing, you know, and it helps us to know how we can do better. Any organisation can do better, and we're looking quite clearly at how we can do that. I mean, this is a high-level document, and there will be a lot more detail to come. But for the benefit of the public, I think we're doing rather well at the moment, or we've been told we are, shall we say. But we will try to do better.
Thank you. Edward?
Thank you very much, Chair. Really just looking towards it sounds like a niche point, looking at recommendation 10 of the report, which talks a little bit about the use of AI. I think it identifies an area which I would say I'm a little anxious about, which is that AI is often the subject of great enthusiasm as an emergent technology, but I think that a lot of the organisations and companies that have taken it up have not yet identified an exact use case for it. Would I be right in understanding, with the way that this report is worded, that we are being suggested to look before we leap and to identify the exact use case for this technology rather than adopting it too quickly? Would that be a correct understanding of the sentiment of the report? Thank you.
Yes, through you, Chair. I think we are taking a very cautious approach, notwithstanding the fact that there are one or two other things on at the moment. But you're absolutely right. It's all well and good investing in artificial intelligence, but unless you can crystallise the benefits from such an investment, it becomes a cost rather than a benefit. So we are taking a very, some might say, overly cautious approach to this, but where we can identify opportunities. And of course, the other thing we have to consider is the timelines with any of these things now. We don't want to be investing in technologies that when we find ourselves in April 2028, where we're having to disinvest or uninvest because we have to harmonise systems and procedures that are very different in all of our local authorities. So we are being very careful at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at recommendation 6, and obviously, general workforce capacity being a concern. I know that we've got the reserve of 400k to help, but I think what we've got to appreciate as members and as the public is that officers will have additional pressure on them because of LGR. And it's the opportunity cost actually from stuff that they would be doing if they weren't doing LGR, which doesn't get covered by this money. And I know when this was talked about, it was talking about LGR on the horizon. We've got the report coming today. It is here. We're having to deal with it now. We're having lots of meetings about it. And obviously that in itself is also creating a workforce capacity issue, I would say. So I just wanted that noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other hands. So the recommendation is that committee notes the report of the peer challenge team, and if I can add, well done, to the officers and everybody that put so much work into meeting the peer review team, and the feedback is, yes, very pleasing. They recognise this is an ambitious council and that is delivering for our residents. So yeah, note the report of the peer challenge team, and then the committee endorses the proposed action plan to address the recommendations and other comments within the report. So that action plan will be published now. Yeah, David?
Through you, Chair, if I may just add, the members of the peer review team will be returning in February to look at our progress. So we've got the follow-up meeting in February to look forward to. Thank you.
Is everybody happy to accept the recommendations, or those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you very much. Next we have consultation and engagement and feedback.
Thank you, Chair. This report, members, proposes an amended and improved approach to our consultation and engagement activity, but with particular regard to the annual all-encompassing survey, which the committee previously considered and which the council has done for a number of years on an annual basis to align with the budget survey. Whilst there's no requirement on the council to consult residents on the annual budget, it is recognised as good practice to do so. There is a specific duty to consult with local businesses as part of the budget preparation. And for many years we've done a very broad survey around that time of year. We reported the results from 2024 back to this committee in February of this year. And it was noted really that the response rate for the survey was quite poor this time and had declined over a couple of years, and the poor demographic representation was of concern. And at that time, in that report, there were a number of potential approaches to enhancing that participation and representativeness. They were noted for further consideration, and I think I said at that time we just had to caveat that with there is a lot more that could be done, but also that's very resource intensive, as has previously discussed. So whilst consultation fatigue was a potential factor to that, we looked at some alternative approaches, and a number of those are in 3.5 of the report. There is a lot that you can do going out into the community to target various groups to broaden that feedback, but it would require a significant amount of focused outreach, which would take a significant time and officer resource. And we've done it in the past where we've been to community venues, we've stood outside supermarkets to try and gain feedback with some success, but not great success. Equally, we could utilise consultants or market research companies. That comes at quite a considerable cost. We looked at providing incentives to encourage participation. I think there are mixed views on that and potentially sort of cast some doubt on the motivation for people to respond to the survey. So looking at those, we really consider it's not possible without a very large amount of additional resource to commit that to an annual survey. And don't think that a large-scale annual survey is any longer a useful exercise for the council. It doesn't really meet the objectives about assessing resident views and priorities for the level and cost of services. We need to note that we're also doing a fair bit of engagement on local government reorganisation at the moment. So going out to residents again and continue asking them more and more questions doesn't really always result in getting lots of responses. One thing we've also noted at 3.9 is it's a very, very broad survey. It asks questions about all of the council's services and all aspects of the council. And it could be questioned whether actually most residents are able to give a meaningful feedback on every aspect of the council. There aren't many people that would be touched by all of our services and therefore be able to respond from an informed base. And it's a very long survey because of the number and range of questions, because of the breadth. So the preferred option at section 4 is that we do a focused budget consultation with local businesses that will run for 6 weeks towards the end of the year. That will also be open to residents, but it'll be very focused on the budget rather than the broad satisfaction survey across all of the council. And at the same time, officers will produce for the committee a consultation and engagement annual review. We do actually do a lot of consultation and engagement across the council throughout the year. I don't think there's always visibility of that to members as a whole. So the intention is that we bring all of that in a report that can sit alongside and be available to you when you're setting the budget in the new year. I mean, examples of focused consultations we've done, the SWDP, the place strategy, our environmental sustainability strategy, tree strategy, and more specific local consultations on some of our play facilities, for instance, that have been installed were subject to consultation before they went in. We also do quite a bit internally reporting on feedback from customers in the form of complaints, comments and compliments. That generally is a fairly positive picture. That's currently collected twice a year and fed back to the corporate management team and the corporate leadership team. And the proposal here is that we would include some of that data, or all of that data, within the overview of consultation and engagement, and bring that to the annual report. Just to note that the customer satisfaction data, which appears in the performance scorecards, caveating the fact that there's a low response rate and poor representativeness, that would no longer be included in the performance scorecards. But those satisfaction and customer feedback data that we do have, we would include in the annual report, so that would still be visible to members, just in a different format. And you may note that we do have an indicator on customer feedback that we ask all customers that touch with the council to feedback. The response rates to that are very, very low at the moment. It is difficult to get people to give you feedback. We do get some complaints and compliments, so we're looking to increase that. But I just wanted to sort of note that. I know a couple of members have raised that with me. And then Appendix 1 to the report talks about some of the potential approaches that were considered by the committee in February that we can apply to our general consultation engagement activities. So really very much focusing our consultation on key priorities and activities, better coordinating the consultations across the council. So we have a calendar of consultation and engagement from different services. Member networks incredibly useful for this sort of feedback. We'd like to utilise that more. Using digital tools more, and potentially some AI, it's something we've started to look at. A word cloud is a very simple use of AI. It's something that we've brought here before. Very, very simple use of AI, I think. And also using our website to try and promote some more resident involvement and in ways in which residents can get involved in democracy and in the running of the council and in the decision. And I think the final thing is about how we can communicate the results of that consultation a little bit more widely. And we're envisioning having a page on our website that we can promote where we put that information there. I think sometimes it sits within a project, but it isn't really seen more widely. So those are the proposals for you. We will continue to do an annual survey. We'll be very much focused on the budget, and we will collate our amended approach to consultation and engagement and bring that in a sister report that will sit alongside that. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we did have a really very detailed conversation at the beginning of this year. So thank you for listening to that and actually looking at a different approach. I think we probably all recognise that the annual survey has kind of had its day, really. It's become an outdated mechanism in a modern world. Right, I saw Adam first.
Thank you very much for the report, and I'm very pleased to see this approach that is proposed to be taken, that we will be taking. I think integrating consultation, engagement and feedback into the delivery of services, the design of projects and the implementation of change is really, really important. And I would gladly not miss at all the specific review and consultation exercises, which I think serve less purpose than knowing that the council in its activities is properly consulting and engaging, and having that as a thread which runs through all our activities is really important. I just want to give a couple of examples. We were comparing in a discussion about the difference between the Scala project development and a more rundown everyday service. The Scala in-depth consultation about a change programme And people really, who we talked to, I think really bought into that. I wasn't around too much at the time, but I gather that's the case. And as a result, we have generated a lot of supporters, and people feel they have now our residents now feel they have a stake in that project. That's incredibly useful, but it's quite easy to do that with a new, glamorous, big change project like that. On the other hand, some of the core services we run, for example, collecting rubbish and recycling, how much engagement can we get into services like that? And that's where I think some of the three themes I would draw out from your general approaches. First of all, stakeholders, identifying stakeholders and reviewing and refreshing who the stakeholders are in our activities. That's really, really important, and I completely welcome that. I think using what we as councillors do, particularly the ward councillors who aren't engaged in chairing committees or being executive members whenever those are forced upon us, using those and those links, that's really important. And so the question, and the annual service planning process for, presumably, I don't know in depth of how you do manage your teams, but I imagine every service, every person has to go through a service planning process, and I expect that you will now be asking them to set out, their service leaders to be setting out what their plans are for consultation, engagement, and then asking them how they did at annual review. So that's really, really welcome. So congratulations, a good approach, and I support it wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad you mentioned La Scala, because I think that's an outstanding example of not just consultation, but co-production of a service, and because it really did shape and has shaped what will go on in that building. And that's why we got people were willing to be involved. I'm not sure it was just glamour. I do think that, for example, the bins and such services like that generate passions. Environmental services generates real passion. And it's not just whether or not the bins get picked up. I think people do want to know that they're getting a really good service, and they're quite happy to talk to you about things like that. But I think that, you know, the fact that La Scala was an outstanding example of this, I mean, it's very much thanks to Sian Stroud here, who did so much work on that. And thank you, Sian, because I think it's a great example of how things should be done. It may have been a bit more glamorous than average, perhaps. But, you know, there are lots of other projects that could be of real interest to get your teeth into. And I do think that we can generate that interest. It's a question of our enthusiasm being communicated to others as well, and trying to get people to tell us what they think and how we can do these things. I'm sure we'll be, you know, people will tell us that.
Thank you. I can't take any of the credit for Councillor Agar's generous words around consultation. We had some very excellent support on that. I think what I would want to do is just draw the distinction between consultation and engagement and say there's absolutely no room for complacency, because what we've learnt is that notwithstanding this massive capital project going on in Angel Place, people can still walk past it and say, what's all that about? Consultation in that context was to address a particular brief and to ask about needs, and then to inform the service planning that went forward from that. And I think that then goes back to Councillor Scott's point about when are we consulting. Again, there should be ongoing engagement around all aspects of service delivery, and we welcome that, as we said, the member channel, so the wicked issues that keep coming up on the doorstep, etc. But a consultation exercise will largely be focused around a change or a proposal to do something differently, whether that's capital or service redesign. And I have to say, unhappily, there may be some service redesign aspects coming up that are to do with budget, for example. Those would be real consultations as opposed to an ongoing engagement channel. And I don't think with our resource we'd be able to commit to consulting on all services kind of routinely every year. I think it's in the context of change, whereas what we're trying to say in this is engagement is just as important, and having different and more dynamic tools for engagement. I think the last point is, had we had a longer run at this and we were a larger and with a different funding base, we would have probably linked the conversation around AI up with the conversation around engagement and how there are more dynamic tools out there for getting real-time feedback from your residents and customers. David's got a phrase about something for the unitary for you to consider, but where we are is we're trying to do something that's going to be relevant to residents and businesses in Worcester with the current resource levels we have. And I think our consultation activity will focus on change and our engagement activity will focus on customer satisfaction. I think, is that about right?
Yeah, thank you, Sian. Yeah, I think priority and focus are probably two words that we just need to bear in mind, that we can do consultation and engagement better between the two. And I think that ongoing engagement sort of tends to identify issues that you may wish to focus on a bit more and maybe have a consultation if that raises an issue that's worthy of more consideration. So there will be various activities and services, but not all services will be consulting on all of their services as part of the service planning.
Thank you very much, Chair. I welcome that Google Reviews and TripAdvisor is looked at, because that is a way for tourists, especially, and people that aren't residents of Worcester, can review the things they've done and the places they've been, and it helps us look at Worcester with a fresh pair of eyes. It's something that people are very used to doing, so I would encourage the City Council to make more of that by putting Google review signs up in various locations so that we can get a very easy feedback from people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for this report. It goes into quite a bit of detail and depth, and I think it's really good. I mean, public consultation really couldn't be more important, and I think the challenge we're always faced with is how to ask the question in a way that doesn't elicit an answer that is unspecific or just, off the wall. When you run public consultation, or if you run an open-ended survey, there's always a risk that you don't reach ordinary people. You reach the well-off or the highly opinionated. I'm not surprised by most of the rejected options in terms of reaching people in the community. Putting our officers in street stalls outside Marks and Spencer's doesn't sound like a very good way of eliciting useful feedback. It sounds like a very, very slow use of an afternoon. And I'm not surprised as well to see that hiring expensive consultants has not been met favourably. I think that there is the huge challenge that you end up essentially bringing in people with the same kind of cultural and corporate backdrop as the council itself, and so you inherit the same difficulties, the same blind spots. The one bit that I was a little surprised to see was social media being perhaps written off as a poor use of time and money. I think it's a different type of engagement than we're used to doing, but it is something which it has a lot of potential. I mean, the cost of running social media ads in particular is incredibly cheap. The trick is using them effectively. That knowledge certainly exists around the table. So one question from my point of view would be, is there a way to feed in some of that knowledge to what you're doing so that we're sort of collaborating on that and making the best possible use of these tools that we have? Again, I wouldn't be saying it if I thought the cost was exorbitant. It's just something to explore. The other thing I was going to throw in as a suggestion in particular, very specifically, it's an idea I've raised before. We have a youth engagement team that does deal with some of the city's young people, particularly in deprived areas. My experience from talking to some of these young people is that the depth of their knowledge of this city is incredible. They get to know things about their neighbourhoods or about their areas that no one else would have any business finding out. I mean, most of us don't go roving the streets at strange hours to be then on the radar of the youth engagement team in the first place, but they have knowledge that we should be tapping into, and I would be suggesting, possibly focus groups involving them could be actually surprisingly productive. And I think it's the perspective of young people that really is needed and is missing from local government all too often. I would like to encourage that we take advantage of the opportunity to engage with them. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Some excellent suggestions there, and yeah, very happy to have conversations about and utilise everybody's expertise to assist. I think the comment about social media is we do use social media, and we use the advertising functions, I think we felt that using social media to push the annual survey probably wasn't going to be productive, and we needed to do some more engaging and exciting individual focused activity around that. But absolutely, and a great point about the youth engagement team, I think something we can use for specific local engagement and consultation on specific issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So yeah, thank you for the report. I think it is a new approach, and in line actually, I think, you know, as an organisation, as a council, we have quite a good track record of engaging with our residents and with our population and consulting. Certainly, I think better than some others, without mentioning any names. And yet ways to kind of increase customer feedback. So those of our residents that do have contact with our services in any fashion, you know, that feedback and that insight is really valuable. And I hope, you know, we can encourage more people to participate in that, to tell us that. So thank you. So the recommendation is that the approach to delivering consultation and engagement activities as outlined in this report is approved. All those in favour? Thank you very much. I think you have endorsement for the new approach. Q1 performance report. This is you again, David.
Apologies, yes, me again, Chair. So this is your usual Q1 performance report for this year, asking that you note the performance, and also in this report asking that you agree to remove 3 key performance indicators from the scorecard. So in the cover report at 3.3, there are 3 there: the net spend, budget gap reduction and general fund reserves. Those are covered within other KPIs or in more detail within the finance report, which will give members a much better detail and overview of those indicators than is found in the performance report. So that's proposed to remove those. The appendix is the usual performance report with the indicators. There are 3 showing on red at the moment, so I'm just going to make a comment about those. The energy saving capital investment project, which is solar at Purdyswell, it's been slightly delayed and is red on time. Otherwise, it's all on track and I think nearing completion. So there's an amended due date proposed for that. So we'd ask the committee to approve amendment of the due date for that project. Our voluntary leavers figures have been skewed somewhat by the savings plan and our voluntary redundancy programme. So that would explain the performance there. And then just one at the end, traineeships. Taking new traineeships and apprenticeships on was, as you'd expect, paused as the savings plan was developed due to the staffing implications of that. But really pleased to say we should exceed the target based on apprenticeships that have now been agreed and are due to start. So should see that back on target for the next quarter. Thank you, Chair. As ever, happy to take questions on the detail.
Thank you very much. Okay, I see a couple of hands. Louis first.
On page 45, there's a graph there that I didn't really understand. It's debt servicing as a percentage of net revenue expenditure. And it's got the figures in pounds, but the title is debt servicing as a percentage. So I was a bit confused what it really meant. And I thought, oh, perhaps you could explain what that graph is meant to show. Maybe this is one for Rachel, I don't know. Page 45.
I've got a question potentially related to that as to, I mean, it's a small increase for this council, but at what point does it become a level of concern? I'm a bit cheeky. I wondered at what level the county's figure might be.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not a percentage. to be honest, and it's one of those ones that was off log that we were disbanding anyway, if I remember right, in terms of this. So I don't know whether it's something with the crossover from what was off log before. So if I come back to you, probably the best thing on that one. But I mean, debt servicing, that should be the amount of what we call MRP, as well as external interest. So it's how much of our budget is earmarked for paying off capital investments, whether that's external loans and or the actual capital. There was an article in one of the Worcester News recently because there was an MHCLG survey done on all debt, and that's where like the KMT was discussed, and some of our other districts don't have any external loans because they pay everything up in one go. A lot to do with Worcester would have been the Purdeswell Leisure Centre. There was borrowing external debt financing that's there. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a way of financing infrastructure that's in there. But in terms of why that's a pound and not a percentage, I should have picked that up before. So apologies, and I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Hannah, I think you...
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to make a point that apprenticeships are not just for people early in their careers and professionals, that you can have level 5, 6, 7 apprenticeships, and it's a really good way of upskilling, and it's a very good way of boosting morale and keeping staff retention. So I would encourage you not just to think about the apprenticeships of level 2 and 3 and helping staff develop their careers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. It's not just all young people that are doing apprenticeships. One of our heads of service has done a management qualification. He's probably one of our younger heads of service, but one of our heads of service has done a management qualification. There are a number of other examples across the council. So yes, it's not old school apprentices who used to be 16 years old when they went through it. We've got people across all the age groups in the council.
Not seeing any other hands up. I don't think there was anything I wanted to comment on. I mean, I think overall, yeah, pleasing performance, and as pointed out, very few items of red concern. I've already talked about customer feedback. Well done to officers in terms of levels of mandatory training, which is something that has been sort of discussed in the past. So yeah, that's a very significant achievement. I did have a question related to Trinity Street. I'm kind of looking probably at, I don't know, Lloyd at the back. It makes reference to staff absence and not being re-recruited. I think I've seen an advert out for housing officers. It's not that we've actually lost posts. It's a gap. It's a gap in recruitment. Yeah, I just think it's really important to that we've not made savings out of the housing officer team, which is absolutely important. So thank you for confirming that. And if anybody's a housing officer and wants to apply for a job, we're lovely people to work for. Thank you. So thank you to everyone for the work behind that. So the recommendations are to note the performance and to agree the proposed removal of 3 key performance indicators from the performance scorecard. So these relate to financial information that is going to be within the financial monitoring report. And I've said to Rachel not to lose all the graphs, because graphs are good. So all those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you, that's agreed and approved. So seamlessly moving on to financial monitoring with 1 or 2 graphs.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the Q1 monitoring report. So it's sort of a position statement as we knew about it in June of this year. So it is early in the financial year, and there's lots of uncertainty in terms of the forecasts of what we would be forecasting for the rest of the year. So I won't say you can take it with a pinch of salt, but I think you've just got to expect the fact that there's an element of uncertainty. People are prudent, not wanting to show underspend yet because they don't know what might come out of the woodwork and in terms of their delivery of their own services. But as it stands at that point in time, we were forecasting a small deficit of £67,000, but that predominantly related to a provision we'd put aside for local government reorganisation costs. Because of the extra work that we're doing, not only with Mutual Ventures but with KPMG, and the government grant that we've received doesn't cover all of that. Over the next few weeks, now we know that there's 5 districts involved with that KPMG, we can refine those sort of numbers. But, you know, if we didn't have that activity, all of the other services would have sort of broke even. There are significant favourable and adverse variances that you can see in the table, in table 1, and that we will continue to look at those in more detail as we go through the year. But some of the larger items, the pay award has now been settled, and that saved us £75,000 for this year, and as an ongoing favourable position going forwards. As it stood, our interest receivable was higher than what we'd forecast because our cash balances in June were higher than what we expected. That might not be the case going forward as we accelerate some of our activities. The housing benefit subsidy is an area where the council allocated an additional 300k of budget for 25-26, but it continues to overspend in our forecast position, so that's something that we are looking at. And as I reported in July, the financial sustainability plan, where we targeted £970,000 saving in year, we actually overachieved on that. So there's an extra £126,000 saving there. There's a lot of detail and commentary in table 1, but if you have any questions, please let me know. And then we have got some graphs just sort of showing with planning income there. You know, I think it's been an issue for a number of years. The budget seemed to be set when it was at its peak in terms of being able to deliver planning income. That doesn't look like it's going to be achievable on an ongoing basis, so it's something that we're looking at sorting out and addressing for future years. And then car parking income, as it stands at the moment, you know, you're there and thereabouts. We've tried to focus the graphs on some of the large areas and not worry about some of those services that might just generate £60,000 that's valid. It's important services, but in terms of a financial impact, we're looking at those larger items. And the other one there that we've mentioned in the report is bereavement income. With the changes at Ashwood Creme, we're just keeping a close eye on that, and we'll have to report back to you at the next quarter's budget monitoring. In section 5, we've got a position statement of our reserves. We do plan to draw down a significant amount of our reserves in year, but that is all sort of planned, and a lot of that is in financing our large external projects like Scala. We've got the capital budget that's detailed there. Council tax and business rates. We are doing well at this point in time at Q1, but we have had a lot of volatility on our business rates income that we are just working through at the moment. And that is pretty much everything, but happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. It's a really clear report and explaining where we're at across the council. So questions or comments? Alex?
Yeah, thank you. I particularly just wanted to comment on car parking income because I'm glad to see that's ahead of forecast at the moment. I did have a question around the Ringo transaction charges of £30,000, which I know I've emailed about already. So most of that is down to that we charge there's a 20p convenience fee that the city council receives, and then we pay 8.8%. So that's not sensitive information to Ringo. And with our car park charges going up, that we are now paying more than that 20p normally for each transaction. Whether we should be folding that, well, I'd be interested to know whether we should be folding that fee really into the car parking cost itself, so that we aren't losing out with that fee in future. So it's just all counted for in the cost of car parking. Thank you.
I think the work that the team are doing is renegotiating contracts and looking to see where we can bring those transactional charges down in the first instance. There are a significant number of transactions that go through the web. If the numbers are right, you're looking at between 800 and 900,000 transactions, so it is used a lot. So there's a lot of 20 pences that people are willing to pay for that. In terms of car parking in general, I think that's a discussion, but in terms of Ringo itself, that there are options that are being pursued by the service to get back into budget on that side of things. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just following up on Councillor Mace's point in terms of Ringo and of just making generally the ideological point regarding historical battle between car parking charges and visitor economy in terms of that. I think the figures clearly show that the trend hasn't declined, and that we are maintaining our car parking income and our visitor economy as a result of our changes in our pricing structure. I think there is a call probably to have a look at Ringo in terms of pricing around our car parks in terms of that, and since we've had the review and the removal of cash machines from certain sites, and see how our car parks are performing compared to previous figures. I know some of our lesser used car parks have had pricing structures that have had a big jump in terms of that. I just want to understand how that affects usage at certain sites in terms of that, and actually could a different pricing structure encourage more people to use some of those car parks. So it'll be really good, I think, across the board to have a look at this opportune moment in terms of Ringo and the pricing structure, considering the levy and the fees that we're getting. The second point I just wanted to clarify, and this is one for you, Phil, at the back. There's a bit of headline grabbing in terms of that. Can you considering there a line in here which says museum under the museums, TIC and events, the Christmas lights, no income generation, 10,000. Christmas fair forecast deficit 10k, and sponsorship income. I just need some clarity around why the changes in what are we expecting the Christmas fair to be smaller this year? Are we, I'm assuming Christmas lights, which are only still going ahead, but it's like in a slightly different format, and I just want to reassure the public that actually everything is as normal and we're not cancelling Christmas.
Through you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm we're not cancelling Christmas. I think that's, yes, there will be lights, there will be a switch on, there will be a Christmas fair.
Sure, just a supplementary then, Chair. It's just what is the forecast deficit in the Christmas fair income? Oh, so that's what I'm considering. Are we getting less traders in than last year, or yeah, because there's considerable difference.
Can you just point to the table or the page, please?
Bottom of page 51, the last.
Yeah, okay.
So do you know the answer?
I think we know it's transitioned over to a different head of service. They're trying to get to the bottom of all of the activity, and it's about just the availability of sponsorship income and all of the other things that they're doing. As I said at the start, because it's early on in the financial year, that individual was just getting up to speed with everything. It may have improved since then, so they're not envisaging any changes, but it's just understanding exactly what the other teams used to do, and with the change of personnel that they've been open and transparent right at the start to say that prudently that there may be some shortfalls, we, you know, on a worst case scenario basis, but the team are looking to recover that situation wherever possible.
Sure, thank you. Just before you come in, I mean, obviously I've been pretty clear in terms of any changes that we make. Victorian Fair, I'm sure all councillors will agree is our most significant event in the calendar year in terms of putting Worcester on the map, and it's been grown on year. So just seeking reassurance if we've got the proper level of resources in terms of being able to manage that event and making sure that it's, you know, as good, if not better, than previous years.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just to add, the deficits are deficits against income generation target. We'd set quite challenging targets for sponsorship generation. And as you can imagine, under the present climate, it's been quite difficult to raise sponsorship. So those are deficits against the sponsorship. But just to reassure everybody, that doesn't mean that there's any jeopardy with regard to the lights or the fair. Thank you.
And are we open to offer for from generous sponsors to come forward? Yes, of course we are. Thank you. Who have I got next? Pat.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask where we are with internal versus external borrowing. Thank you.
The report that is going to audit and governance next week has probably got more detail on that because it's actually got an in-depth treasury report, so I haven't got the numbers on the top of my head, but the council itself is significantly internal borrowed. So that means that we've got a healthy working capital in terms of our reserves, and we collect money in quicker than what we pay money out, so that we don't actually have to have external loans to the maximum that we would be allowed to under prudential indicators. So I can get the numbers to you, but we are in a good position that way, and therefore you're not paying interest on loans and worrying about where you invest that income to try and keep it safe.
Thank you. I was looking at Table 1, 2025-26 forecast outturn by service with interest, because there's various elements where there are surpluses or where there are deficits. One area of surplus was under property and assets. And I thought it was interesting to note that EV charger income is there, that the Arches is generating income for the council. It is, I think, really nice, and I think it is worth pointing to the fact that the clean energy transition is already paying dividends for the city, and you can actually measure that, even in a small way, even in an earlier stage, in the budget line of how the council operates. And I think it's good to see that policy beginning to pay off. Yeah, thank you.
I was just going to say, I mean, you've missed the big figure there, which is savings of 179k on gas, use of gas. I mean, almost certainly that is largely due to switching off the cremators. And you know, we've had feedback in terms of the project and managing that project. They're literally going to cap off, remove the gas supply, which is a huge impact both environmentally and in our cost profile in the budget. So yeah, thank you. Rachel, you want to?
Yeah, just so we do receive income from the Arches, which is great, but unfortunately it's not at the original budgeted level of income. So that 44k is actually an adverse variance to the budget. So hopefully, you know, we'll get a little bit more income when the last one's occupied, but it will be something about readdressing the balance on that and not trying to put anything up. It's just about readdressing the balance now we know what the activity is like.
I just have a quick question. You might not have the answer to this. I'm happy to ask it at a different place. But I'm aware that the weeds on top of the Arches are a bit of a problem, and I wonder if we know how much, if we can quantify that problem in the how it's affecting us, or is it having an impact on our income?
Thank you for the question, which I very much welcome. The Buddleia is a real issue. The vigorous root growth has definitely contributed to the water ingress that we've had in the Arches that has led to us spending more money on the cladding. The you're probably aware that the sort of ownership structure is Network Rail, and then below that Archco, which owns the portfolio of arches across the country. And, you know, I can't quote an individual Archco person tonight, but I can tell you that they've always previously advised us that Budleigh across their whole stock across the country is an issue. It's definitely contributed to the problems in the brickwork that have led to the water ingress. We don't have a kind of strong hand in lobbying on that because we are just a handful of arches that have got the same issue across the country. The other thing that we've had with those arches is the water ingress is more acute lower down. It's something to do with the angle as the train line goes down, and the arches further up just haven't had the same issue. But it is an issue, and one that would be worth, the cause that somebody would be well worth taking up. Notwithstanding Budleigh obviously is a biodiversity enhancement, it is a problem.
Not an enhancement to brickwork, no. Thank you. Not seeing any more hands up. I just kind of want to say well done to the finance team in terms of the additional information that councils target to pay local suppliers within 10 days, and we're doing that 95.4% of the time in the quarter. That's a really important role model and a way of supporting our local businesses. So thank you to the team for that performance and delivering that. So the recommendations to note the financial monitoring details, including budget variances and performance indicators for the first quarter ended the 30th of June. Note the write-offs of council tax and business rates for that quarter, and to note the forecast balances on earmarked reserves at the end of the financial year. So all those in favour? Thank you very much. That's agreed. Item 9, local government reorganisations. This is a discussion paper with quite a lot of rich content. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. It's an information item, yes, and it's to support and inform the decisions that full council will make in November. And it's to acknowledge that some of the issues that are of interest to us in Worcester may not be necessarily on the national radar or top of the conversation. So just to bring that back down to a local conversation for us. And as I say in the report, things that we'll want to make sure we are proactive on in designing solutions as we make a submission and as we look to implement whatever option is ultimately given to us. So again, just to characterise it, you know, we sit in the Guildhall and people here, current serving members, officers, previous generations, have strong associations to the proximity of the building to the high street, the mayoral function, the civic function, the history of Worcester, the royal charters, all those things are things that we know about because they're issues in Worcester. They're not necessarily on the radar in Whitehall, so to speak. But nevertheless, in the context of local government reorganisation, other historic cities have been reorganised previously, as you'll know. There is a route to follow and a path to follow. So anyway, under the sort of heading of local governance, I've set out a number of areas, and I've really put them in a particular order because the only one that is of particular interest nationally in terms of local government reorganisation is how do we achieve community level engagement in local decision making, and you'll see that that appears in the bill that's going through the houses at the moment. Community level engagement, neighbourhood level engagement, these sorts of phrases being used, and I make the point in the report that neighbourhood governance in the context of what the government and the bill are saying doesn't mean parish council size. It appears to mean the preferences for area committees within a unitary council footprint. And again, that's not a new idea. There are unitary councils up and down the country who operate a system of area committees. And the Local Government Information Unit published a paper in July that I can circulate where they did a little bit of audit of existing area committee structure. So what I'm saying is, as far as local governance is concerned and a local voice, area committees is currently the favoured model for what goes in our submission as far as the sort of sector expectations are. So then I've tried to explain what an area committee can and can't be, and of course it could be a number of things, but it has to be seen in the context that government is expecting all unitary councils will be operated on executive arrangements, cabinet and leader model rather than a committee system. So we've got to understand it from that starting point. So then in area committees, the expectation is that against your unitary new footprint, area committees would provide total geographic coverage. So that might also mean that your geographic coverage wouldn't look exactly the same as the previous structure when you were a cluster of districts. Your boundaries might be in different places, for example. The next thing to think about in area committee is it might be decision-making or advisory, and that I think would be partly a political choice because it would depend what level of strong control the cabinet and leader model had, you know, sort of numbers really, political control and balance numbers, as to how comfortable that executive felt about giving area committees decision-making powers. So I don't think, again, if you like, as an outgoing local authority, I don't think that's a thing we can design a solution. I think some of that would be about political expediency when the numbers come in. So far, so good? Keep going? Yeah. So then I think in terms of what those area committees could be doing and what they already do in existing unitary areas, they are supposed to be a local mechanism, a two-way dialogue. They may well have co-opted membership from health bodies, education providers, community leaders. In any of those roles, those people or organisations would always be in an advisory capacity. In the world of local government, the functions that an area committee would discharge, if they were given any functions by the executive, for example, a budget to spend on, I don't know, small grants or local maintenance issues, the decision makers would be the elected councillors. So anyone else would be there on a co-opted basis in an advisory capacity. If you could have policy committees and regulatory area committees, you may well have that. And if you end up with a large unitary footprint, you may well have two planning committees, north and south, or something like that, for example. Again, in the world of local government, your regulatory functions being non-executive, that would be a completely different area committee to your policy committees. So you could end up with quite a lot of committees. So those who like committees, there's a way back. But I must emphasise that the mandate would be very much led by the preference of the executive. I think it's really important to recognise that. Then I think it's understanding then, so what does that mean for existing neighbourhood governance mechanisms? Is it a threat to parish councils? What does it mean for parish councils? There are different opinions in the sector, and I don't think the position's settled. But given that the government expects parish and town councils to be doing something different again, then they reference the idea of parish or town councils being a contributor to area committees instead of replacing them. So I think and you may view your parish council as a provider of services in many respects. Also, obviously, I'm not decrying the kind of governance responsibility of a parish council, but the area committee is the voice and the listening ear of the unitary council. The parish council is a legally separate entity. So that's what I wanted to say about area committees. Really, it's just a kind of seems to be, from our point of view as officers, this seems to be the writing on the wall in terms of what the government would like us to submit as a neighbourhood level governance model. There don't appear to be any other options that are being explored. And it's also fair to say that the County Council, in terms of them looking at their reorganisation proposals at the moment, they're looking at the area committee structure, and they've started some officer work around that. And again, those who are familiar with the white paper and the conversations about devolution would recognise that the government's very clear that, as I say, the voice of health, for example, is a very important voice to bring into local government and make sure those conversations are happening. So I think we could see health providers being involved in area committees and no doubt local policing bodies. So that's the area committee aspect. Chair, do you want me to pause on each section or just keep going?
I think that might be helpful, as long as people are kind of mindful of the sections to come, if you see what I mean. So, I mean, Mel, did you have a question on this part or a comment on this part?
Thank you. I did on this and later on the mayoral function, but just it was more with the neighbourhood area committees really. And I'd like to thank Charlotte in particular for her clarity around this area, which is a bit of a minefield. So I feel quite clear, but I think from looking at some other councils, obviously it's going to be a cabinet role, so if you're cabinet or scrutiny, you're quite empowered, but I can see a lot of the neighbourhood area committees And if they're advisory, I can see already a lack of motivation or interest from members with those, and so I'm not convinced on those is the best way forward. I can understand the collaboration and working with the NHS and others, that will work, but I think it'd be really important that whoever is at Cabinet, they get the right level of responsibility, otherwise you're going to have a lot of demotivated councillors. I think. Thanks.
In the report, it talks about there could be policy areas, policy area committees and regulatory area committees. So it's, you use the word could be. I would have thought that it probably should be, there will be or there must be regulatory committees for things like licensing, taxi licensing, for example, and planning. So things like licensing, taxi licensing, that might be an advantage doing it at a higher level because you can get some more standardisation across a bigger geographical area. Might be a good thing, I don't know. But you also mentioned about, you said you could, for example, see there would be perhaps a north and a south planning committee. Whereas today we've got a planning committee in all the different district areas. You could end up with people making planning decisions about the local character and planning decisions, which could be quite controversial, in quite remote ways, from a long way away with councillors who don't live in the area and so on. So I think that's something that we ought to be very mindful of in trying to make sure that planning decisions are made by people who know the area and represent the people in their area and elected by their area people. So something to keep a hold of really, and to keep sort of raising it with the government ministers and the people that you no doubt talk to in the leadership of the council. That we want to make sure that local decisions are made by local people for local, local reasons and with local knowledge. So it's just sort of, we need to be quite firm, I think, on making sure those regulatory committees are done in a good way for local people. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a paper for discussion, isn't it? It's so Sian is setting the context and the legal frameworks to help us understand and to help us discuss. So, in a sense, it's not for being prescriptive at this point, if noting the feedback that you have a view that regulatory committees should be on a geographical basis within a unitary. I think that's, yeah, thank you. I've got Jessie next.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about point 3.5 in the report. It talks about clause 58, and it says that it provides the Secretary of State with the power by way of regulation to define neighbourhood areas and to specify the parameters of what arrangement will be appropriate to meet this duty. Am I correct in interpreting this, that this is essentially centralising quite an unprecedented power to a senior politician in London, essentially being able to define boundaries and be making us susceptible to gerrymandering? Am I interpreting that correctly?
The Secretary of State's power I read to be a measure of last resort, because it's in the context that there is a duty on local authorities first and foremost to make appropriate arrangements for effective governance at a neighbourhood area. And then consistent with everything else we find in reorganisation, the Secretary of State holds the power then to make regulations if necessary to define neighbourhood areas. I think that those powers are used in the context of what is the ultimately agreed submission, what is the functional local geography. The Secretary of State could overrule, but otherwise the powers will be used just to make regulations which would give effect to what the local authorities had submitted. So I don't, with the information available, I don't read that as a power centralisation clause, but they've got that default. So if it couldn't be agreed locally, they would no doubt come up with a map that they thought was suitable.
Is that normal? Is that a new measure, or is that always existed, or is this new for this in this bill?
The Secretary of State always is given a power to make regulations to make things so in order to implement. So that's standard. And in the Local Government Act 2007, the Local Government Involvement in Health Act 2007, which has got most of the reorganisation stuff in it, the Secretary of State there has the default responsibility to come in and make regulations as required. But as I say, in the process that we're involved in at the moment, that David and Lynn are leading, we are making a submission to government based on what we think is appropriate. So the feedback about what we think is geographically appropriate, both in terms of unitary footprint and smaller neighbourhood clusters, they are obliged to have regard to that. And I guess if we can't agree, that's when they would impose something different.
Thank you. So I think the use of the word neighbourhood is quite interested in the paper and the white paper and the legislation, because to me a neighbourhood in Worcester would be something like Tolladine or Barbourne or Purgewell or the Arboretum. But clearly, if a neighbourhood area is considered to be larger than a parish council at the moment, that's potentially could be the whole city or something like that. And whether I don't personally at that point feel like it is a neighbourhood, and a lot of how I feel about whether we should have a parish council or not will determine what kind of powers are delegated to area committees, because we've seen at the county council meeting in the last week that the executive at the county council at the moment are not interested in spending money on schools in Worcester. They're not interested in providing the services we need. And if an area committee is delegated to be able to do something about that, then fantastic. We've still got some local accountability that can make decisions in the interest of our residents. But if they're not delegated that power and it just sits at the executive level, I can't really see area committees as anything more than a talking shop, because we've just got I know this is supposed to be about simplifying local government and removing layers, but we seem to have a layer that doesn't really do anything unless there is that delegation. So I think it needs to be properly empowered, and if it's not properly empowered, then I think it strengthens the case to have a parish council for the city, and then that gets into more complicated governance arrangements, because not to get on to the next point about the mayor, but if we have a parish council, does St Peter's and Warner Villages continue to sit outside any replacement parish council? Does the mayor of Worcester then not become the mayor of those areas of the city, which wouldn't seem to make any sense to me? And when looking at things like the city plan, obviously that's a really important document to decisions that we made in this city, because we refer to it in our policies of what we want going forward. If an area committee is charged with creating that and maintaining that and making sure that it is being given due reference when policy is being set by the county council, then that's great. But again, if they're not empowered to do that, then again, I think it comes back to looking at a parish council for the city, because that is a body that can make plans and saying, look, these are the things, and giving feedback and saying these are the things we want in the city. And it also depends to me where the home for the new unitary is. I know that some Wychavon councillors have been calling for it to be based in the existing Pershore Civic Centre, and I think if that is the case, then again that makes a case for having something like a parish council in Worcester, because we need something that is a body that is of Worcester, that can make decisions and give regard to what we consider important, not having people who are going to Pershore and not coming into our city and not considering what we need going forward.
Yeah. I mean, the parish councils and what they can and can't do is the last section of this paper. So I think you've kind of covered the whole remit if we're doing it section by section. But you want to come back?
Yeah, I was just going to add that we just need to remember that the parish council is legally separate to the unitary council, and in this scenario where the reorganisation is ostensibly predicated on being ready for devolution, then there's a much stronger conversation between the new unitaries and the strategic authorities, and with absolutely no disrespect intended to parish council, you've got to then just reflect what that means for the actual voice, purchasing power, influence of parish councils. I know we're going to come back to that, but it's really important that we just recognise that area committees are contemplated, and it's what do we think would be a good, what are the important points? We've had some feedback about the importance of the regulatory voice coming through, and again, in local government world, regulatory functions are entirely separate from the work of the executive. So in that regard, you might say they're protected. You know, they are sort of capable of not being overruled by the executive. but the geography is interesting, and it could be, just picking up your point about a plan, it could be the place that, it could be the situation that a new unitary that absorbs 3 previous district areas, for example, ends up with 3 city plans or 3 town plans. I'm not sure that the executive would view those as the function of an area committee to look after. I feel like the area committee is the neighbourhood level, is the more, is a lower geographic building block still. It's about the provision of service delivery within their neighbourhood. I don't think it's supposed to be the advocacy for a whole economic area. So I mean, I know we're in an uncharted territory, but some of this is going to be a field to a degree. But they do exist elsewhere, and I don't think where they exist elsewhere, the executive are using them instead of things that they would put through the executive. And I think if you were the executive of a unitary council that had absorbed 3 districts, I don't think your Worcester City plan you would delegate to an area committee. I think it would be something your executive would look at. Because we use ours as a manifesto for investment, don't we? And I just don't think we would, if we were larger, I just don't think we'd give that to an area committee. So just trying to be pragmatic as we go along, and obviously we can't design a solution that looks a lot like what we've got now. That's just not going to survive the reorganisation.
I've got other people wanting to speak on this. If kind of privilege of jumping in to give an example or some examples which might be helpful. So I noticed in Worcester News during the last week that Wychavon Council were asking for volunteers to help shape the district and for people to join 2 panels. I was able to have the conversation with the leader at Wychavon, and these are not newly set up panels. It's that they have vacancies that they're looking for volunteers to join. And in fact, they have a number of panels. So a funding advisory panel, a town centres advisory panel. They've also got, and within the towns panel, that's for the 3 main towns within Wychavon, each of which has a place board. And so the community funding panel helps inform decisions around new homes bonus, and with a scoring matrix for grants. They've also got a rural panel and a carbon reduction panel. And those advisory panels report to the executive board, so report to cabinet, and the relevant cabinet member is assigned to each of those panels. So, you know, that's a governance landscape that we're not familiar with, but one of our neighbours is using, and arguably each of those is a kind of neighbourhood area committee or with a particular flavour. So just, you know, it is about thinking how things might be done differently. So coming back, I've got Adam next.
Thank you very much. So when I read reports like this and think what matters, I think the city of Worcester, to me, is what matters. We have been a city for a very, very long time, and it's been forged by the people who ran the city back from Anglo-Saxon days, then the days of our industrialisation, by the people who set up businesses here. They came together and formed the body which ran the city. In most of the 20th century, we were a county borough, and the city council ran practically all the local services which were delivered in the area. Those days are going. But the city is still a really strong geographic, cultural, economic and historic entity, and one which we should do everything we can in this process to hold on to. Now, at its best, it would be, we're not going back to a county borough, which I think would be the ideal scenario, and there's all sorts of reasons why we can't do that. But I think we should be working our damnedest to find something which is a durable, citywide body, which brings together as we have been doing at its best, representatives from all over the city and its different cultures, from the businesses who forge our economy, from the bodies, the public bodies and the charitable bodies which make up the strength of Worcester and its engagement and people getting stuck into the place and making sure it's a better place to live and feeling really proud of living here. And somehow, in this process, we have to capture what's best for that. Now, I don't think it's probably a parish which we might call Worcester City Council. I don't think we're looking for separate, democratically elected bodies representing just this city. I think those days are probably gone. But I think we should be looking for a body which brings together those key stakeholders and which represents the city of Worcester and its distinct place it is in the wider context to the strategic region, to the wider unitary, particularly if we don't get our wish and have a South Worcestershire unitary. So a representative one, but not necessarily running services, although that would be nice if we could. And I think probably that would be the model I would look for in the area committees, which you could call the Worcester City Small Print Area Committee, and that would be quite a good solution to me. I think the geography within the city, I think it's really hard to work out which area is the appropriate area. You can possibly see the river as some kind of divide, but otherwise, I think most residents here, most businesses, most people who are in this place see the Worcester as their place. They don't see their what we normally call neighbourhoods or villages or estates. It's Worcester, it's the place, and that's the thing we need to represent. Durability of it's really important because the great virtue of an elected body, a town council, the existing city council, is that it's established, and however much the broader decision-making body in the area which it lies may choose, that is still the body. You can't suddenly, you know, the county, when we were a county borough, couldn't suddenly say we want to get rid of the county borough in the middle of it. That would have to be done, and even if we were a district, the county couldn't get rid of a district like that. It's established by, it's instituted by Act of Parliament, I guess, and you'll know better than me. So, but something which is durable and can't be mucked around with. So we know that it's here, and it'll change with things happen. But it'll still be there. There will be a body which is holding on to the nature of the city. Final thought, which is the city over its years has expanded its boundaries as population of the urban population of the area has grown, and the city's expanded. That hasn't happened for many, many years, although the city population has been expanding beyond. How people live their lives is different in the modern world, and actually you can see the core city in its suburban and rural, connected rural context, and that's probably what how South Worcestershire will shape up. So Worcester as the city at the heart of a broader area, with associated towns with their own particular strengths, a hierarchy of settlements. Worcester is the most preeminent one. And that's also to need to be thought about as we go through this modelling. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. This is all quite mind-boggling, isn't it, actually? Because we feel like we've got lots of possibilities. But I'm trying to think of how I see things. I try and think of things in a very practical way sometimes. And, you know, what's important to a resident, and the thing that probably is in most of our inboxes is our bin being collected, is a bin being left on the pavement in my way, is, you know, is a tree being cut down, is, you know, these kind of day-to-day things that matter to residents. And I think what we've just got to make sure of, that we know how, if a resident comes to you as your elected person in your role, how would you deal with it? Would you go to your area committee? Would it go up to a unitary? How long would someone have to wait to have a decision made? You know, it's like we had that problem with, you know, using chemicals in Gallivelt Park, very responsive from the officers, dealt with it really quickly. It's to do with the policy at the City Council. That might not be a policy that is shared at unitary level. Is there a risk that some of the responses that residents are used to about things that they care about are going to be at risk, and how can we protect that as best as we can? I think that's what I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you. I've spent a year as a parish councillor before being a city councillor, so if I'm opinionated on the topic, I'd like to think I've at least got a basis to be. I find myself, I mean, as this discussion has gone on, I find that I'm increasingly cautious about the idea of establishing more parish councils in Worcester. One of my bases for feeling that way is thinking of residents in places like Tolladine and in Warndon and in Dines Green. Parish councils come with additional precepts, and I don't think residents in communities who are already struggling with bills will thank us for adding to their tax burden. I think that's really important for us to keep in mind. Yes, you know, maintaining the heritage of our city is key, but we need to be thinking about who's being asked to foot the cash for that. I think the other consideration that really concerns me about that is problems with setup. Again, the practicalities. Now, I share my colleague's view on that one. I think that we need to be practical about it. Where do you draw the boundaries? Once you start drawing boundaries, you're into a very long exercise that could take months, years, and the process could be complete, you know, for general local government reorganisation before that's rolled off the conveyor belt. Assuming you can find agreement across the city for how to draw those boundaries and where to put down one or more parish councils, you've then got to get 7.5% of the population for a large parish council to sign off on a petition to make it so. I think that's, practically speaking, a lot of people to try and reach in a city like ours. Yeah. Sorry, am I jumping too far ahead?
Yeah, because that is the detail about parish councils.
Yeah.
So I've just got Steve left. So Steve, okay. Is your comment around this first section? Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chair. So I have two questions. One is in terms of looking at this detail of the area committees and the submission that we will need to make to the Minister in is it November, I think, isn't it? What level of detail is expected in our submission? Meaning, are we actually looking at saying, you know, this is how we envision it working in terms of the number or the geography of area committees? So that's my first question. The second question really is, it sounds to me like we're saying that we are thinking about these issues of local area committees and how that will work, but ultimately, once the unitary is set up, it would be within the power of the Cabinet to essentially just ignore any of our thoughts, plans, ideas, anything that's been put into the proposal that's been approved, and actually just decide for themselves how that will look without regard to the actual plan that was submitted. Am I correct in thinking that?
Through you, Chair. On the second point first, I'm not entirely clear myself. I think going back to Councillor Jagger's point, there is this legislation, there's this new clause around the Secretary of State may make regulations. I think that the reason that I can't be clear is partly because the bill is still only a bill. The bill has gone to the trouble of saying we think neighbourhood level of governance is really important, and then there isn't detail provided. So between now and between submission and kind of scores on the doors next summer, there may well be clarity from government about the expectation is it must be at least this. And if the Secretary of State does have a set of design principles, for example, regulatory committees at an area level, or I don't know, there's some design principles that do get conveyed, then it follows that they will be in the Secretary of State's order that creates the new unitary. But in ordinary terms, area committees are just a function of the executive and can be, like with any constitutional review, can be reviewed and overturned. So I think what I'm trying to do is sound a note of caution that we can design the future. I just don't think it's been given that level of prominence in the legislation.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think, if I remember rightly, in the bill it talks about the government aiming to co-produce. Once the decision is made next May, in terms of the and then through the process of regulation, the government will look to work with partners to establish the neighbourhood committees. I think, picking up on a couple of other points, it does seem to me that what some of us might regard as a neighbourhood might be very much smaller than the size of the committee area. And the reason I say that is we might be, if we're not careful, inundated with committees, and it would be quite an administrative challenge to manage a very large number of area committees across the piece. So I think they might well turn out to be much larger than what any of us would regard in the first instance as a neighbourhood. Picking up the second point, as Shana said, the structural change orders, you know, are a statutory instrument that will set out the fact that we are abolishing this number of councils and we are setting up new unitaries, and the new unitaries will have this many members and this number of divisions or wards. I don't think it will go into some of the level of detail that we are concerning ourselves about. And so, whilst it might be challenging, there is the opportunity for an incoming shadow authority to look to change some of the things that might be in our proposal, so to speak. It won't be easy, of course, because time won't be on that shadow authority's side. They will only have from May 27 till April 28 until they become the new authority. But there is some flexibility that could sit with those shadow councillors and subsequent unitary councillors to do things slightly differently. So it just adds to the rich tapestry that is local government reorganisation.
Thank you. I'm going to move us on. City status and royal charter rights, I think, as you've heard already, our city status and city identity is really important.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and it's important that the legislation that abolishes us and creates a successor makes specific provision, because the sort of legal quirk is that the charters were given on trust for the benefit of the city, and as a corporation we are the current trustees, and those who have gone before us in terms of reorganisation, the process has created charter trustees so that they can notionally hold the charters on trust for the benefit of everybody in the city. So it's quite a nice visual sort of metaphor, isn't it? And Adrian's got the actual charters, obviously. So anyway, so we know that some of the rights that come with having royal charters. We take a particular interest in the mayoral function, but obviously we also have the right to be called a city and a number of other things. So there's this legislation that establishes the concept of charter trustees and regulations that explains how they work. The ordinary approach is that the new charter trustees will be outgoing councillors from the previous local government organisation, those who are elected to represent the area within the boundaries of the former city or borough. So it's a slightly narrower footprint than the current Worcester City administrative area. Then charter trustees have the rights and customs conferred under the Royal Charter, but only the ceremonial matters: election of the mayor, holding of ceremonial and heraldic property. The local area retains the right to use the title of city or borough. Charter trustees cannot hold land or any property. So any building that was held with any sense under the Royal Charter that it was somehow part of the Charter Trust, that would transfer to a new organisation, so the Unitary Council. We don't think that's the case for the Guildhall in any event, but I'll come on to the Guildhall. But the reason that the Charter Trustee establishment is really important is that if we don't create trustees, we lose our city title and our ceremonial functions, including title of mayor. So then I've just set out some of the mechanics around that, and again just drawn the distinction that Charter Trustees is the legal mechanism. It isn't interchangeable with the establishment of a town council. In some instances, a town council has been established, in which case Charter Trustees aren't needed separately, and there are unitaries that I've named that haven't established town councils, and they have just got ongoing Charter Trustees. They've got their own mini web pages. You can see what they're up to. You can compare ceremonial robes. They are very much alive and well and administering a small calendar of civic functions as Charter Trustees, if you like, hosted within the Unitary Council. So that's the sort of legal mechanism. There's a bit of legislation around the minimum number of trustees. It seems to me the legislation's silent on whether they must be councillors, but the norm across the country is that they are councillors. Lastly then, they're not full local government administrative bodies. They are trustees. They have certain powers, but they only have a budget to the extent that they are given a budget by the Unitary Council, which hosts them, and accommodation by the Unitary Council and so forth. So they've got a right to demand a precept, but you know, they're obviously kind of at the mercy of the Unitary Council and how significantly the Unitary Council invests in that function. I'll just move on to the mayor and then I'll pause. So election of a civic mayor is a charter right, and we know that, you know, I think that the title of mayor will survive, but the civic nature of the mayor will become even more obvious compared to the elected mayors working at the strategic authority layer. They will be the chair of the Charter Trustees, and a mayor and a deputy mayor. They will be expected to have a civic calendar to really advocate for the kind of, I quite like this phrase, support and promote the activities which express civic pride and enhance the historical links and traditions of the city or borough. So again, just keeping that mayoral visibility going. And yeah, as I say, I think there is some capacity to raise finance, but it is obviously subject. In year one, there's a budget, and subsequently it's subject to a precept. So yeah, I thought I'd just pause there and cover that if there are any questions on that aspect.
Thank you. And just, I think it's important to point out that the mayor would normally be a councillor from the unitary authority and representing a division within the historic Worcester City boundary. So Mel wanted to speak. I'm looking out for others.
Chair, thank you. And it kind of crosses over to parish council, so feel free to stop me and I'll come back, but they're kind of both interlinked within the point and the comment. So obviously we know Hereford has its own town council effectively, and the paper refers to Bournemouth, Christchurch, St Paul. They've got chartered trustees, and I've done a little bit of research onto that, and there are some challenges, criticisms and unresolved issues around this, and they relate to limited usage of funds, reserves accumulation not always being used as it should, disparity between areas, there are issues with public engagement and awareness, and obviously legal structural constraints. And it says because chartered trustees are non-statutory roles, their powers are limited. They cannot, for example, raise the same kinds of funding or have the same functions that a parish or town council might. This limits what they can do in terms of community governance or local identity beyond ceremony. So I think I'd like to comment. I'm just worried that we're looking at this area in too much detail and we're saying this is what we're going to do, and we're precluding ourselves from any sort of option of becoming a town council. And I think it's really important to ensure that this council has debated that in full. And I think when we come to town and parish councils on this same theme, I'd like to comment then if I may, or continue now if it makes more sense.
I think maybe kind of pause at that point. I don't think we're precluding a town council. Again, it's understanding, isn't it, the pros and cons of the different options. I mean, my understanding is we're going to need charter trustees in order to have a city status. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding as well. I think if the town council was established before the unitary is created, I still think the charter trustee mechanism is required, but maybe the people in the town council are named as the charter trustees. I think that might be how it works.
So any other questions or comments with regard to city status and the mayor specifically? Okay, shall we move on to the Guildhall? Into the Guildhall, we are here.
Thank you, Chair. So I think it's just reflecting that the Guildhall, there are other city assets which are named in primary legislation in the Worcester City Council Act, Hopmarket and Pitchcroft, and you'll be familiar with those and the reasons why. The Guildhall isn't. It does, going back to the point about how a community of people have built the City Council over the centuries, there is a story about that in the Guildhall and how that was fundraised, and the current Guildhall is, you know, the product of the local fundraising efforts. But the question is whether in law that's created any kind of trust that gives the building any special legal status already, that would mean it is protected from any subsequent disposal, for example. So I'm recommending that we get a little bit of expert advice on that, but that we proceed for the time being on the assumption that it might not be, and that for the purposes of reorganisation, then it's just like any other asset, albeit an extremely historically significant asset, but that it would just go on the list of assets for transfer to the new unitary. In legal terms, it obviously already enjoys a high degree of protection as a Grade 1 listed building, but unless there is any, as I say, underlying trust mechanism that would prevent its disposal, or we can have anything written into the new primary legislation that creates the new unitary, it would otherwise be an asset which could be disposed of if that was the appetite of the new unitary, unless there was any other legal argument as to why it couldn't. So I think at the moment what I'm saying is that's all we know. Residual legal rights and interests are worth exploring. Other important assets for the city, Hopmarket and Pitchcroft, have been written into legislation. There's provision in there about Pitchcroft remaining open to the public, as you know, for certain amounts of time. There's a provision in relation to Hopmarket about the consent being required of the City Council prior to disposal, but we can consider and see whether anyone else has previously enshrined a new asset into some sort of protection before reorganisation. But I think, again, we just have to manage expectations that it might be ultimately, in legal terms, viewed as any other asset. I just wanted to make you aware.
I mean, is it worth just kind of covering off the fact, no, as a council, we own lots of assets, as do the other districts, as does the county council. So as part of the, you know, becoming a unitary, there'll be how those assets will be dealt with as a generality. I mean, the Guildhall is arguably our premier, most precious asset, and hence, certainly in terms of public identity, is the most important. But just a quick cover off of assets in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think the starting point in the reorganisation process is that the assets of the district council will transfer to the new unitary, and the assets, you know, the property assets and other physical assets and intangible assets at the point of transfer. And I think we always refer to the Guildhall because the point of this paper was to unpick the different elements which people hold dear, the mayoral function being different to the physical building in which it's currently hosted. And unless the building changes hands in the sense of the freehold title before reorganisation, then I think the assumption is it will transfer to the new unitary.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a marvellous building. I seem to remember Dr. Green, the university fame, saying that this was the finest building in England, and in many respects it is. It's the finest building of its sort, anyway. I also went as mayor to Gloucester to the opening of the Three Choirs Festival some years back. And the mayor and mayoress of Gloucester virtually apologised for the fact that they had sold off their town hall and that we were actually meeting on that occasion for various, for refreshments and all sorts of other ceremonial things in a rather bland building not too far from the docks, a very modern building which had absolutely no character at all. They were very pleased to come here to our banquets and things like that, and our commemorations and celebrations. I don't think the city would easily forgive us if we didn't try to protect this building in some way, and if we can find a further way of protecting it beyond its listed status, clearly that is something to be desired. I think I'll leave it there.
Chair, thank you. Yeah, just following on for that, where we said further research is required. I mean, obviously we've got the submission in November. I'm looking for assurance that we will have done what we need to and undertaken research, so we can be assured as we are doing everything to protect the Guildhall, following on from Councillor Agar's point, really. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely want to and need to, and you know, it's the right mechanisms, and I mean, yes, this is just such a superb building, and you know, all credit to this council, our predecessors, for maintaining it in the superb state that it is. And the fact that David uses the assembly room as his backdrop on Teams meeting. Yeah, there is a significant amount of Guildhall envy out there from other councils. Thank you.
Can I add a point?
Yeah, go on.
If I may, through you, Chair. One of the parts of the process in terms of local government reorganisation will be in the new year, between January, February, March, April time, after we have submitted our proposal and before the Minister makes, in this case now, her decision. It was a him up until a few weeks ago, her decision. There will be a consultation. The government will undertake a stakeholder consultation. And I just would like to say for members that it's points like this that will be really important to be covered off in the consultation with the department in terms of things that are really important to us. As Sian has said, we will need to do a piece more work to see whether there is any legal title that we can fall back on or any regulation. But we need to use the consultation period in the new year to make our views very clear about what we expect to happen to this building, to the department. Thank you.
My question has been answered. Thank you.
I strongly remember hosting an international trade delegation in this building to a banquet. I also hosted the education minister from Bangladesh and a bishop from Tanzania. You know, this building has been a focus of international interest, not just interest from the city itself. It has actually been important much more widely. And I think that we should remember that as we make our decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it is a way to impress visitors, isn't it? Absolutely. So moving on, last section. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just thinking about the need to protect it and keep it available and open for residents, because I often walk past the Shire Hall or the County Court on Foregate Street, and obviously that is a very grand looking building from the outside that I have fortunate never to been inside. But if you look up the like, are the tours available, or what's the history of it? I've searched on Google while I've been sitting in this meeting, and it says, did you mean this Guildhall? And that's a kind of asset that I think sits in the city that isn't really available for many people to enter. And obviously it used to be a council building itself. And that's kind of how uses can change over time. We want to make sure that the Guildhall continues to be available for the people of Worcester so they can see the impressiveness of the building and it doesn't become shut off behind a fence, used for other purposes that only a limited number of people go in.
We obviously ended up covering quite a lot of this already. It was just to explain what the mechanism for establishing a new parish or town council is. Bear with me. Got a helpful message about AI, which has locked my screen. So, I mean, the paper obviously sets out that, you know, you can establish a town council at any time through a community governance review. So through that process, thank you. Thank you. Pretty much. Through that process, any number of the electorate can, you know, effectively petition. We could initiate that process, or members of the public, or particularly active wards could ask us to start the process. So the existing legislation, the Local Government Public Involvement and Health Act, covers the process for doing that. So the required number of signatures for a petition for a community governance review is 7.5% of the area with over 2,500 electors, so it's not a huge amount of signatories. The community governance review then is, you know, a review and consultation process. If this was undertaken whilst the district council was still here, then the decision-making body is the district council for the purposes of that community governance review. It doesn't get escalated to a Secretary of State or any other higher body. So if there was a proposal to establish a town council or a parish council, a new one in the city, or even review an existing one, then the decision-making body would be Worcester City Council currently. And then I think the next thing to say is that it is therefore very much a local organisation. It then becomes, you know, it is then, I suppose, Councillor Scott's point, it is then created and is durable until such time as another body does a community governance review and abolishes it. Because once it exists, it's a new local government organisation to which elections must happen, and it's got the power to demand a precept and so forth. You'll be aware that then, just moving back up slightly, you'll be aware that a parish or town council has significantly reduced powers compared to a district council or a unitary council, and it is also limited by the resources available to it. I mean, that's not to say that parish and town councils don't operate a vibrant, you know, service, but they do tend to provide local services, and they wouldn't have the sort of bandwidth to replicate everything that the city council is providing and delivering. And I suppose as long as we all understand that, that's where I'm coming from. Also just noting, linking back to the point about charter trustees, there was obviously the example given where one of the new local authority areas did consult on establishing a town or parish council as well, and they didn't receive positive support for that, and one of the reasons cited was the new precept that would be added on. So they opted for charter trustees instead. I suppose it's just then also a function of timing, just to say that one thing doesn't preclude another. So a decision not to create a new town or parish council at the point when we submit in November or even next year doesn't mean that that door can't be reopened. It's an ongoing right that won't be replaced by any of the legislation. Thank you, Chair.
And can you just kind of clarify, it's my understanding that parish councils and town councils can't provide statutory services of any kind?
Well, most of the functions of the principal council can't be delegated, so that's where that principle comes from. So a new principal council wouldn't be, most of its functions wouldn't be capable, or they would choose not to delegate them. So there could be some discretionary services that they could choose to delegate, but most of their main functions they wouldn't delegate. And typically then parish and town councils occupy that space around kind of civic amenity, perhaps some grant giving, community events, some cleansing and very neighbourhood level activities, but city.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to thank officers for the detail in this report. I can see that it's taken a lot of time, which officers were not twiddling their thumbs before local government reorganisation. And I think that's really important to note, that all the time this work is happening in LGR, other work is not happening. In the pre-meet, I was trying to think of a polite and positive word to describe local government reorganisation. I was unsuccessful in that task. I just can't see how this is going to be better for Worcester residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I jumped the gun earlier on in the meeting. I'm just that enthusiastic about local government reorganisation, I guess. I think I just want to reiterate sort of my concerns, really, that I think a parish council is something which sounds good in council meetings, but I think from the perspective of residents, it does introduce extra levels of confusion. We exist at the moment with the confusion that residents will often come. I had a meeting today with someone who is a city resident who was not sure which council I belonged to, and I had to explain the difference between the district and the county level. I fear that with a parish council, you reintroduce some of that confusion that we are getting rid of with LGR. I think particularly I want to circle back to the concern I was beginning to articulate earlier, which is the number of signatures, the number of supporters needed to establish a new parish council it's a substantial number of people. I struggle to envisage that level. I might be proven wrong, but I struggle to envisage that level of enthusiasm for it. I think that as long as the key assets of the city remain in the hands of local people and that are preserved for the future, and as long as the city of Worcester as a formal city continues to exist, I think that is the sort of the priority as far as that will go for a lot of residents, and I would be reluctant to put them in the way of an increased tax bill with an additional level of local government. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know I strayed onto this topic earlier, but it's partly because I think these are all largely interlocked issues. I think definitely we don't need any new parish councils at the moment. The Charter Trustees is definitely the way forward to maintain all the civic functions and allows for the future bodies to decide what we actually do. Because there is such uncertainty around area committees and what their function is and what their area is, to try and set up a parish council or parish councils at the moment without understanding how those fit in. So it's a job for the future. I think there definitely, like I said, could be arguments for a parish council. I understand the idea of cost and the concerns around that, but I think because I'm sad enough to have been watching the Wychavon District Council meeting about local government reorganisation because I too love it so much. There was a discussion in there around the option B, the 2 unitaries one, will be a £12 premium per household. So, there is additional costs that will be coming to our residents anyway, but we're doing that because we think there'll be better services. And the parish council could have positive effects for people. We know that unitary councillors there's going to be less of them. They're going to be doing more work. Are they going to get the pay that's required to be able to do that job properly, or will they need support from people in their local community? And I think if they do, then a parish council possibly fits in well with that, because then they can have more people representing the area. There's more people who can do the work and share it out. Whether that's something we want to do in future, that's a decision for future people to decide. So I don't, like I said, no parish council, but we can keep the door open to considering these things in future.
Chair, thank you. So if obviously this paper has already pretty much said that in view of other arrangements in this report will be made for community level governments, it is submitted that it is not necessary for Worcester City Council to resolve to create a town council. So if we don't do it at this stage, what is the difference if we do it later in process, and whose responsibility does it become?
The principal, the legislation talks about the principal authority, and in a scenario in 2028 when the principal authority is the new unitary. That will be the body that is permitted to undertake the community governance review and establish a new town or parish council. At any point up until then, it would be the district council.
Make one final comment. I promise that's it. I'm sorry. But yeah, sort of when we go back to 3.22, comparing charter trustees to parish council, it says here, in conclusion, under these charter trustee arrangements, a mayor and deputy mayor for the City of Worcester could still have a visible presence and operate a calendar of civic events, but however, inevitably, this will be subject to the budget and other supporting resources made available by the Unitary Council, and to that council's preference as to how much emphasis it wishes to place on the historic and civic traditions, and that does concern me greatly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I think hearing some of the debate around here in terms of the benefits of LGR, and not many people can come up with many ideas, but I think the point is lost on the people that are making those comments in terms of actually we can't carry on as we are. Unitarisation in the Worcestershire aspect is absolutely needed. We have a two-tier authority. We have a crumbling county hall and the upper tier authority that isn't getting things right. The only way to change that is the process that we're going through, and that we have greater control over what county hall does and a seat at that table. So absolutely we need that change in order to effect that change that we want. So staying as it is, carrying on the way we are and hoping things get better, that's not the way. That's never going to happen, and that's not the way to go. In order to effect change, we have to take the power. We have to be able to use the circumstances that have been given to us and control what we can control. And this is the process that we can control in terms of that. Having said that, I do have a real fear about, obviously, all the concerns around here about losing local voices in the mix in terms of the unitarisation process with even bigger boundaries and even less local voices, and actually under the current climate in terms of certain voices completely disappearing around the table in terms of our equality, diversity, in terms of our minority communities having completely lost a seat at the table. There's no protection in the current mechanism that we're going for in terms of any political wind or change in 2027 elections, or whenever the elections are called, that those voices will ever be heard again. How do we protect those? So a mechanism for those is possibly parish councils in areas that have never had parish councils before, to ensure those local voices aren't lost. So that's my real concern here. Okay, buildings will be here longer than people will ever be here in terms of that, but actually it's those local people that over the years, over the centuries, over the millennia that have shaped the decisions in order to make the buildings that we are in and ensure our democracy thrives. And if we lose those voices in local government reorganisation, then we've defeated the object of the whole point of our democracy.
Thank you. Just thinking about this as we go forward, we haven't really discussed about the two possible wider scenarios, whether or not we're part of Worcestershire as a whole, one Worcestershire, or a South Worcestershire, North Worcestershire. And I think the county councils still seem bent on pushing for one Worcestershire, and they might still win that. And that makes the importance of protecting our standing in the wider footprint of a wider footprint unitary even more important. I found one really good example of a historic city which has is in a unitary situation without a parish or town council, and that's Chester in Cheshire West, which I think was working quite well as an authority. What its future lies, I don't know what's happening in the northwest, but that clearly, that's a very similar example and about the same size core city in a bigger area which verges on the industrial Merseyside. So how they're working there might be a useful example. But just replay the timing in terms of when the shape of the unitary is made by government and what chance we get to make our stand and when?
Through you, Chair. So once we've submitted our proposal on the 28th of November, there will be two opportunities. There'll be the stakeholder engagement process that I mentioned a moment ago, which will take place before the Minister makes her decision on whether to go with a single unitary or two unitaries, or dare I say something else. That's always an option. So there'll be that process in the sort of after Christmas in the spring of 2026. And then once the decision is made in around about May or June of next year, after local government elections, because although they don't apply to us, some places will have elections in May, including Redditch, for example, in Worcestershire. Therefore, we are expecting that the decision will be made after the local elections take place, so late May, June, potentially. Once the decision is made, the next part of the process is the establishment of the statutory orders that will commence once we know how many unitaries we're going to have. And those orders will, as I said again a moment ago, those orders will set out the necessary statutory instruments for the abolition of the existing authorities, the creation of the new authorities, the shape of the authorities in terms of how many wards, how many councillors. That process normally takes between 6 and 9 months. So one could expect that process to be completed by around December 26, early 27. That process will need to be completed because in May 27, the elections to the shadow authority will take place. So everything will need to have been signed, sealed and delivered in terms of boundaries, number of wards, number of councillors, all those sorts of things. The government has made it clear that that second process in terms of the establishment of those orders, whilst ultimately it sits with the Secretary of State, there will be a process of consultation with the predecessor authorities. So that will be another period between, let's say, June and December of 26. I'm trying to get my years right. June and December 26, during the establishment of the SCOs, when we will be engaged in that process and we will have a part to play in the detail of those. And then at the end of that period, they will be laid before Parliament, they will become legal, and then off we go with the elections for May 27. I hope that's helpful.
Sorry. Thank you for all those contributions and thoughts. There is a huge amount to think about, and it is decisions and thoughts about the future of our city. If I could make just a couple of points. I mean, the fact that actually more than that, for me, you know, the local government reorganisation the aim is around simpler and not the barrier of and the confusion as to who does what, and the ability to join up the thinking, to join up the halves of services, you know, to join up waste collection and waste disposal. Part of the reason I'm so keen on South Worcestershire as a concept actually is about pulling powers down from county, rather than giving power away upwards. And I think, I can just give so many examples of frustration of the blockages that the county have imposed, or that barrier puts in place. I think in thinking around, local neighbourhoods and parishes, actually the opportunity to think outside the box, or literally outside the boundary. We know that within South Worcestershire Development Plan, we know that the Worcester City urban extensions are sitting outside of our current administrative boundary. And there's an issue there in terms of who gets the council tax, who provides the services, as well as community identity. And there are communities that are kind of split across the dual track, and the example of roads where waste collection is done on one side of the road by one authority and on the other side of the road by another. So the opportunity to bring those together and maybe to rethink some of those actual community identities without an artificial administrative barrier. And then the last thing, an opportunity to share the fact that I, as leader of the council, had a letter from MHCLG, from the new Secretary of State, and David, as Chief Exec, also had a copy. That was a clear letter that despite changes of personnel, the agenda and the programme across all of the activities within MHCLG is continue as you were. So no stepping back, no slowing up, no changing within that. I mean, it's not a letter with any detail, but a very clear message that, I hear the concerns about local government reorganisation, and I've heard, a number of people express hope it all goes away, hope it doesn't happen. There is no indication from government that it is going to go away, and it is how we best shape the future for the benefit of our residents and our communities. So thank you for everybody for your contributions on that. I see Sian's made lots of notes to take forward. Thank you. Annual safeguarding update. Lloyd, this is your moment.
Apologies, my battery's... Okay, thank you, Chair. So each year we bring an annual safeguarding report to members of this committee in order to update you on the work we've been undertaking during the previous 12 months in order to discharge our safeguarding responsibilities. This evening we're also asking members to approve an amended safeguarding policy, which I'll touch upon in a couple of moments. So each year we remind members that even though we're not regarded as a lead agency for child protection or safeguarding, we are under a number of legal obligations as a district council. One of those is to safeguard and promote the welfare of children who may use our services, and the other key one is to make inquiries relating to anybody 18 years or older where they're either vulnerable to or experiencing risk, abuse or neglect. Members will be aware that we have our own safeguarding arrangements, and that includes a specific safeguarding policy as a council. We have a group of safeguarding champions at officer level. We have safeguarding advisors who are that next tier up, they are safeguarding experts. And we also have a range of reporting channels, so each of the teams, especially those key teams, like housing, certainly private sector housing, they've got their own dedicated channels to be able to report concerns through. Oversights provided by both the corporate management team and by CLT, and safeguarding within the council is led on by the head of Homes and Communities, who is Tom Mountford. Some of the key numbers from the previous 12 months include a mandatory training compliance rate of 86%. The reason that's not 100% relates to sickness and maternity leave, so there's always a bit of a churn in terms of training compliance. 2 all-member sessions have been held, training sessions throughout 2025, which were well attended. We've made 13 safeguarding referrals to the County Council, and there's been a further 38 internal requests for safeguarding advice. Those numbers are very similar to last year. The report mentions the 2-yearly safeguarding self-assessment audit that we carry out, that we're requested to carry out by the safeguarding board at the County Council. And this morning, CLT received a report that informed us that we had assessed ourselves as good. So there are some recommendations for us to take forward in the next 12 months. Nothing serious, and they're more around communicating existing policies and processes. And that assessment will now be submitted to the County Council safeguarding boards for their consideration. The report also touches on 2 areas of work that we're involved with that allow our officers to effectively work with vulnerable adults, including the better joining up of services, but also there being a single point of contact so that we can support vulnerable individuals rather than passing them off at specific points along a referral pathway. And then just to come back to the revised policy for approval, Chair, the policy in front of the members this evening, the substance and the essence of it hasn't changed. There are just some minor amendments in respect of contact details, links and advisors details. So just some light touch changes that I hope members can support. So I'll stop there. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments around the room? Pat?
Thank you. I'd like to say a few words with my Armed Forces champion hat on. I'd like some assurances, really, that the disadvantages that veterans can manifest or have are included in the transitional arrangements, and that I'm not quite sure how CALM actually relates to us at the moment. Do they actually contact our frontline services such as housing directly, or do they just talk to, or heads of department, or do they talk to just our community safety team? I'm not quite sure about this, but I really want to be sure that Armed Forces veterans are considered when we are looking at disadvantage and mental health issues.
Chair, I'll probably need to take some advice and come back to Councillor Agar on the detail, but obviously both councils are signed up to the Armed Forces Covenant, and we've got a range of our own policies which refer to armed forces veterans and the challenges they face. But if I can come back to Councillor Agar with a bit more detail following the meeting, then I'd be grateful.
Thank you.
If I could just pick up, because one of my queries was around the CALM framework, which is complex adult risk management. And it says in 7.2 about a post is due to come to an end. Is that a post at County Council or a post within Worcester City?
Chair, I think the course is via the County Council and not the District Council.
So, I mean, that is a concern and a risk, isn't it, in terms of processes going forward, given that this is for some of the most sort of complex and difficult to manage cases. Is there any way we can sort of feed back that concern, or anything we can do to influence that?
Yeah, we can pick that up, and I'll feed that back through myself and Tom, and even thinking about it as we submit our safeguarding self-assessment, we can use that as an opportunity as well to raise that point.
Thank you. Alex, you wanted to come in?
Yes, please. I mainly just wanted to share an experience because I had a communication recently about a safeguarding concern and referred it on, as per the policy, to the community safety team, who I can only commend for their fast and clear response on it. I do have some concerns about the emails I received from Worcester County Council on the same subject, that you know, obviously when these things are coming up, it's residents who are sometimes in extreme state of distress, and getting confusing information from the county doesn't help. So the emails I had from officers at the Worcester County Council, which copied in the referral, referred to Worcester County Council, WCC, which I think is a rather confusing acronym to use, and also told the resident that they shouldn't be contacting community safety about it. Now, I know our policy mentions the idea of no wrong door, and I would hope, as we're updating this policy, that we can share it with the county council and remind them of our policies, that the right things were being done, and that their communication should be clear about which body they are.
Seeing any other hands up. If we can put on record, I mean, thank you to Tom Mountford. You know, he does a really excellent work with this, and to all the other staff involved. There's a couple of points I wanted to pick up, because I'm conscious within the policy, you know, I have a role in ensuring safeguarding in place. In paragraph 3.5, about quarterly updates with the corporate management team and sort of feedback across the thing, I wonder whether it would be appropriate if I, you know, came to one of those meetings on an annual basis, if that was appropriate.
I think that is appropriate, Chair. I'm sure that'd be welcomed by those staff working in and around that subject area as well.
Thank you. And then the other one is, you referred to the training and the level of staff training. You very diplomatically skipped over the numbers of councillors who have done the training, which kind of identifies a gap of those that haven't. Absolutely not a place to publicly name and shame, but if as group leaders we could have the feedback on the missing persons, so that we can follow up with that. I think we worked with David Sutton's team to get everybody up to do cyber training. I'm sure we can use a similar mechanism to make sure all councillors are aware, because we do get, you know, very vulnerable people come to us. We see people in circumstances that are of concern, and we need to be equipped to deal with those, or to make appropriate recommendations. So if you can kind of take that as an action, that would be good. So recommendations, committee note the contents of the report, and particular the progress and updates in respect of the council's safeguarding responsibility, and approve the amendments to the draft safeguarding policy attached at Appendix 1. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Agenda item 11, Managing Director's urgency powers.
Sorry, just very briefly, so in line with the Council's constitution, this report is simply noting members of a decision taken by the MD under urgency powers on 11th of July in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chairs of this committee. So the decision related to a very minor increase, £731, to the capital budget relating to the Aswood Crematorium project, and the urgency was the need to let the mains work contract in line with the project programme, which enabled us to start on site on the 8th of September. I'm pleased to report that we've met that date. If we hadn't been able to let the contract due in July, that would have pushed the programme back by 6 or 7 weeks, delaying our return to Aswood. So on top of the inconvenience for residents, there would have been an income impact as well. So happy to leave there, Chair.
Through you, Chair, I just want to, we are as senior officers sticklers for process, and if there's a need to exceed an agreed delegated budget, we will follow due process, even if it is only £731. Thank you.
Every council taxpayer's pound and penny counts and is of importance. Yeah, Alex?
Can you have asked for a £731 discount?
we could have done, but we didn't. Thank you.
I think it was a value engineered, negotiated conversation around the contract, and it's gone to a local business as well. So we need to formally note the recommendation and the managing director's use of urgency powers in consultation with chair and vice chairs of this committee to make an adjustment to the capital programme of £731 in respect of Astwood Crematorium project. Are we all happy with that urgent decision? Hooray! Thank you. Any other business? I'm not aware of any. No one's told me about any. Thank you. We've covered a great deal this evening, so thank you for your patience and for your contributions.